So here we are, episode 2 of the Liberty Room. I'm Mike. He's Mike. Here we go.
Let's roll, baby.
So we made it. It's been 2 weeks since we last recorded a podcast, and
Tell the folks at home why we didn't get to record last week.
Icepocalypse 2021.
Is that what it's called now?
Well, snowpocalypse, icepocalypse.
I think
It was a frozen tundra. All I know,
something.
for people here in the Gulf Coast of Texas, we're not built for that. What did it get down to? Like 16 degrees?
It was cold.
It's ridiculous.
It was very cold.
But you survived?
I survived, had some plumbing issues
Yeah.
with my mother-in-law, and I became a master plumber.
Yeah. On the day that we were supposed to record.
Yep.
Yeah. So
I have that under my belt now. We'll put that on my resume.
so that's why we're late getting this
Master
out, right?
Plumber.
So we lived through the frozen tundra experience, which was wild, pretty wild. But a lot of other things have been going on in the world, and I think that's what we're here to talk about today. Is some of those current events that have been happening over the past couple of weeks.
While all us hobbits are freezing and going without electricity and water and shooting one another at HEB for, chicken, the government doesn't stop.
Never stops.
It keeps on churning out more and more ways to make us less and less free.
Yeah.
Which is the whole point of our podcast, right?
100%. So big news. The talk for the past few weeks has been this omnibus bill that Congress has been working on. And lo and behold, the far left-wing side of our government was trying to push through a $15 minimum wage.
Yeah, which has been on their... I mean, that's their wish list for going on 100 years now.
200 years.
Yeah, is some type of government mandate to private businesses that they have to pay their employees a certain amount of money, or they'll take you to jail, or they'll put you out of business, or they'll fine you in some way. And they've done it. We have a national minimum wage already, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, so what's been driving this, right? I mean, why now, right? I mean, minimum wage, I think federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour.
I think so.
It has been for
8-9 years, I believe.
If not more. I mean, it's been quite a bit of time. So that's a pretty big jump. I mean, more than double what the current minimum wage is now.
100% increase.
So,
and I think they're doing it. I think I read it's like by 2025. It's not going to be they sign this bill and bang, you pay $15 an hour, $15.50 an hour.
Yeah.
I think it's an increase over the next 4 years.
Yeah.
Which, if you think about it, what happens in 4 years? Oh yeah, another election.
Well, I didn't think about that aspect. So, I think what we've been hearing is, people aren't able to make their rent. They're not able to, a living wage. They're having to seek government assistance. They're not able to do the things that a lot of us are able to do on this minimum wage. And I think that's what's driving, a lot of this is the hope that by bringing up that minimum wage, people will be able to do what? I mean, afford better housing.
Consume more, maybe.
Consume more.
Yeah. It's not the theory of a rising tide lifts all boats. It's just the theory of give more people more money and they can buy more things.
Keep the economy churning,
Sure.
keep things growing in that regard, right? Is kind of the...
And I think there's an underlying honesty that the political class understands that our country doesn't really produce anything anymore. And we consume far more than we produce.
Yeah.
So if we're a consumption-based economy, you need more money to consume things.
Yeah.
Even regardless of whether those more things are more expensive or not, which we'll get into here.
Yeah, for sure. Another big thing that's happening right now. I mean, we're coming on to the 1-year anniversary of the COVID lockdowns, shutdowns, mandates. I mean, here we are at the end of February when we're recording this. Who knows when we'll publish it? But at the end of February here, I mean, we're realistically sitting on almost a year now of these shutdowns.
And you're starting to see, as you wanted to talk about, you're starting to see a few, state by state, obviously, but here just kind of in our state, you're starting to see a few counties and cities push back on that.
Yeah, for sure.
I
There
know
has
it's something near and dear to your heart because you lived there. You lived in Bandera.
yeah, true. And
So talk about that a little bit.
yeah, so
Tell the folks at home what you want to say.
So a county that I used to live in for about 8 to 10 years, Bandera, Texas, Bandera County, last week, their county commissioners just proclaimed all businesses are essential businesses, which means...
That's big.
yeah.
I mean, I was in the construction industry whenever all this started, and we were deemed essential virtually automatically.
Right.
By virtue of oil and gas and chemical plants. So for a business like... What's an example of a business that got shut down immediately?
So bars.
Bars.
Right. That's movie theaters, gyms,
Right.
restaurants to some degree.
Things people like to do.
Yeah, things people like to do. Things people like to do on a regular basis. So by them being deemed essential, now they're not having to comply. The thought is they don't have to comply with some of the state mandates as far as occupancy restrictions and things like that. So
do you think there's any truth to what I think I was reading yesterday? The Governor Abbott said he is basically ready to reopen the whole state. I know you're not a big fan.
Yeah.
But how do you feel? Do you think that's what he's saying is true?
I don't know. I don't have any reason to doubt, that what he's saying is what he intends to do. But what I'm concerned is even if the governor does that from a state perspective, we still have these small tyrants in places like Harris County, Tarrant County, Dallas County,
right.
which Austin, right?
Sure.
I think, even when Governor Abbott eventually relinquishes some of these mandates and kills these executive orders, it's quite likely that, especially in these urban counties, we're going to see continued restrictions on businesses and so forth. So that's a big concern, right? As a small business owner myself, although I'm not in one of the businesses, I am deemed an essential business because I'm in healthcare. The places I like to frequent,
right.
The places I eat out multiple times a week. Yeah. I like to
go to the gym.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Me neither. But no, I think here's the other side of it is when you talk about these businesses that have been shut down, how does that relate to our topic for this show, which is the minimum wage? And I don't want to say most of, because I don't have the data to support that claim, but a lot of these businesses, you would think by common sense, these are businesses that probably employ people at minimum wage.
Yeah.
I would be very interested to see what percentage of, whether it's, like you said, gyms, bars, restaurants, like flower shops, gift shops, clothing stores that are not your, multinational or national chain stores that employ people. Because we can go to H-E-B, we can go to Walmart, we can go to Best Buy, we can go to any of these large big box retailers, but it's your mom and pop, your small businesses that are being shut down.
Right.
What did you say earlier? Thousands, tens of thousands,
if not hundreds of thousands,
businesses that have gone under and will probably never come back. And a lot of those employ people at minimum wage,
right,
or slightly above it, and they're definitely affected by the government coming in and saying at a federal level, well, you have to pay, Johnny or Jane $15.50 an hour.
Yeah.
Or we're going to put you out of business. So that's a big thing, and I think that kind of ties it in to the the overarching theme of this show, which is minimum wage.
So let's just dive into that then, right? So before we dive into the meat and potatoes of the minimum wage, how's the whiskey?
It's really good.
It is.
Terry's
really
enjoying it as well.
Magical Terry off screen. Who?
Tell the folks at home who Terry is. No, we don't want to name anybody for fear of reprisal.
That's right.
Reprisal.
It could be a made-up name.
Yeah. It's his real name.
So, minimum wage. That's going to be the topic du jour. Trying to think where to begin when talking about minimum wage, and let's just start at the beginning.
Sure, like in the Bible, in the beginning, right?
There you go.
How it starts. 1931 is when I believe it started. 25 cents an hour. Can you believe that?
Unbelievable.
What was 25 cents an hour?
Well, it's like my folks tell me, I used to buy a hamburger for a nickel.
I think you had about 8 or 9 years of legislation. 1938, 1933. I believe one of them was actually deemed unconstitutional. It was one of Roosevelt's laws that they passed as they brought in his government there in the Depression. And I think it's like most of legislation that gets passed is there is a underlying group of people who are your do-gooders, right? And those do-gooders, I do truly believe that those people really have good intentions.
Well, they recognize a problem that exists. I mean, we're talking about the Great Depression. I mean, a pretty significant problem that exists. Everyone realizes that.
Exactly.
So they want to
do something,
fix that,
right? Yeah. And so the do-gooders have this group of people who we'll call special interests that end up actually being the ones that write the laws, right? And these are who are these people, right? Who are the ones that are pushing for a minimum wage?
Right.
And I've always, again, kind of going back, I believe that they start off with a good intention, and they have sponsors of their intentions that are going to have to be the ones that enact these, which are the businesses, basically. So your minimum wage law was basically an answer to a problem, which was people had no jobs. So the government, through the Civilian Conservation Corps, all these Depression era programs, which I've listened to one of our people, Milton Friedman, some of your esteemed kind of what we consider conservative economists or supply side economists. They don't really discount the necessity for those programs because things were it was so crazy, right? And it's a response to a problem. And why was it necessary for the government to give people jobs, right? You're coming off of a Great World War.
Yeah.
People are in the streets, children starving.
It was near 30% or whatever unemployment at the time.
Crazy.
We don't have the stats right in front of us, but I think we're all pretty aware of it. So yeah, I agree with you. I mean, there was great intent, and this had never happened before in American history that we had put this minimum wage policy in place.
And it was only certain businesses. Like it
correct. It wasn't across the board. Right. That's exactly right.
As far as I know, it was not every single business, which it's evolved to, from the 60s and 1970s, where it became every business basically.
But this is coming on. This is 90 years ago, right? This is 90 years ago, and so we've had damn near a century to see, the implications. The consequences, many, I believe, unintended consequences of putting into place this federal minimum wage. So what are some of these consequences? What have we learned over the last few decades?
I think the people have learned, but the politicians haven't. They really, they still see it as a lot of what we've talked about as a way to get votes. You can have this ceremoniously high wage that the politician can go and campaign on and say, I got $15.50 an hour, but if nobody actually gets that wage, right? And that's kind of what we really want to talk about with and expose people to is the fact that just because you have that rate doesn't mean anyone's going to get it.
Well, has the poverty level changed any appreciable amount over that period of time?
It's inverted. It's gone up.
Right.
People are worse off.
Right.
Now, can you attribute that completely to minimum wage? Absolutely not.
No, there's a host of factors, no doubt about it. But we can at least staying on topic with minimum wage, though. I mean, one of the things we talk about a lot, you hear a lot, is this term the wage gap or wage inequality or what have you. People say, in the middle class, there's been this wage stagnation.
Correct.
Right. And I know that minimum wage is supposed to help correct that, try to try to get the people who are at the bottom end of the ladder in terms of earnings and lift them up to try to get them up into that middle class and raise the standard of living for everybody, right?
And I think a lot of what happens is it ends up just creating more poor people, because when it boils down to it, it's not my original thought, but I definitely agree with the concept of how really and truly discriminatory a mandated wage floor is.
Let's dig into that, because I think this is the crux.
Right. So when I say it discriminates against people, what I mean is that it discriminates against people without job skills, right? So as an employer, for example, you can want to hire somebody who you may really want to hire that person because you have an instinct or some visceral gut feeling. This person is going to do well for me, right? This person is going to, and I want to help this person more than even that. But this person just doesn't have the skills. I really need somebody that's had maybe a year, I don't care whether they worked at McDonald's or flipped hamburgers or swept floors or done anything. What I'm talking about when I say skills, how to show up on time, how to come to work not stoned or drunk, how to
I have to go to work right after this, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. How to conduct themselves if you're a customer facing business, how to talk to people.
The most basic of basic requirements.
Basic skills that you don't learn in high school. Yeah. So you don't learn any place except for the real world, getting that experience. And so people get discriminated against unknowingly, in my opinion, that they don't have those basic skills. And if you have a person willing to, we're big on liberty. We're big on freedom, right? Yeah. So we're big on voluntary exchange. And if I come into your place of business and I say, hey, I'll work for $5 an hour, man, I just want a chance. No one will give me a chance. I've put in interviews, I've done resumes, I've done applications, and nobody will let me in the door. Man, I'll work for you for $5 an hour. I just want to do something.
That person doesn't even get the opportunity to do that,
right?
Because, and they get passed over because I would say you don't have the skills. Therefore, I'm not going to hire you. Right?
You probably would be a little more nice about it.
Yeah, but I mean, I think in the general scheme,
I can't help. Or look, ma'am, sir, I can't help you. All right, so.
Well, how many people are we talking about, though? I mean, I think it seems like when we talk about the minimum wage, it almost, when I read these media stories,
it's like every single person in the world.
It just seems like everybody's making minimum wage, right? But what are we really talking about in terms of numbers?
I think it's less than 2%.
Okay.
Of total wage earners. Maybe I think the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Department of Labor, they issue reports every 2 to 3 years, right? So I think the most recent one was 2018, 2017, and they estimated 2%, more or less. Which historically it's been higher. In the late 70s, early 80s, it was 13, 14%.
Yeah, exactly.
Which that's when they started baselining all and actually keeping this data. But again, it goes back to this idea of if someone wants to voluntarily work for less, the government tells you, no, you can't pay them less.
So,
and therefore, they're going to be unemployed.
Exactly, right? They're out of a job.
The real wage, as Thomas Sowell points out, is zero.
Right.
In the absence of a job, you get $0 an hour. Now, who really gets zero money? Virtually no one, because we have welfare programs, housing, food, rent, free education. The list just goes on and on and on of how many handouts there are.
Well, that's the big argument, Mike.
So does somebody really get $0? Probably not, because most people, statistically, through surveys, through research and scholarly work, have a vehicle.
Right.
They have flat screen televisions, which is a television. We're old enough to remember when TVs were flat screen. How much did you pay?
Some of you kids don't know.
How much did you pay for your first flat screen TV?
Oh my God, $1 billion.
Yeah, so people that even our most impoverished people, outside of your, people that are like your true homeless that live on the street or whatever, most people that are in this category of poverty, they have more than, your India, you're talking about poverty, your Middle East, you're all across Africa and, and China and Asia. Our poorest people are rich by their standards. Right?
Yeah, we do have a very America-centric view of the world,
Yeah.
right? Where we don't understand that there are people like in Cuba that live off $3 a day, or
Less.
in places that live off
Right.
$3 a month, right?
And so that's where the whole argument for this higher minimum wage, I believe, gets muddled, right?
Yeah.
From this emotional argument of, like what you said, a living wage. Well, I don't believe that someone in government should really decide that.
Well, but it creates this system, right? So you just talked about a few minutes ago about take that person, nobody actually makes $0.
Sure.
Because we have these government programs,
Sure.
We have these entitlement programs.
You have charity. You have private charity.
Yeah, and
that
charity
actually
as
help
well,
people,
right? All of these things that, food stamps, HUD for housing.
Sure.
We have utility subsidies,
Yeah.
a lot of different things.
You go to college, virtually.
Free daycare. I mean, there's a waiting list, of course, but so the argument then would be, well, if companies paid employees more money, then we wouldn't need these government
Sure,
programs,
exactly.
right? So I mean, that's a real world argument.
And that assumes the fallacy in that argument is that businesses can afford to pay it. Just because I'm in business, I have a restaurant, well, by God, I should be able to pay somebody $15.50 an hour. So yeah, it's a big there's a lot of assumptions built in there that aren't grounded in real world.
Well, because it creates a market, right? The market is the market, and people say they're willing to spend, under the current rules, under the current regime, we're willing to spend X for a product, service, or something like that. The market does not take into any effect how many entitlement programs exist or what have you. In the absence of those entitlement programs, market decisions would be quite different.
Wouldn't it be interesting?
Yeah.
Do you think, this is a thought I've had a few times when I've had this discussion with people, is in the absence of, let's call it the social safety net, right? Without naming off every single thing involved with it. Let's call it the social safety net. So in the absence of that, right, would a $15.50 an hour wage floor be justifiable? Potentially,
Perhaps more.
yeah. Because if you're not where does that safety net come from?
Right.
Workers that pay taxes,
Right.
businesses that pay taxes. So if those funds were freed up, is it the liberal left wing argument is that if you give business owners more money, they're going to go buy more stuff for the business owner. It's not going to trickle down, which I don't even believe. Like, I've taken all the graduate level economic courses. There was a challenge, I believe I read, I forget, maybe it was Sol in his national syndicated article. He put out this challenge where he would pay somebody $10,000 if they could provide proof that any economics professor at any level of any college with any kind of certifications or quality of their work could produce somebody that said that is an actual thing. Like, that's not a real thing, right? Is that if the business owner makes more money, therefore trickle down economics works, right? So the theory is that if you allow business owners to make more profits, they're just going to keep it. They're going to go buy a Lamborghini or a Rolex, or
Right.
whatever. It's not going to get passed down to the
Right.
workers. But it'd be a really interesting thought experiment to say, well, in the absence of a safety net, would it be possible to pay your workers more?
Well, I mean, but we do have some data, right? We do have some data. I mean, I think one of the things we were talking about a little bit earlier off camera was the impact on minorities, right? I mean, that's another...
That's their big emotional selling point, right?
Exactly. So, but I believe you were telling me some data that you looked up, pre federally mandated minimum wage.
Sure. 1920s, 1930s, blacks in this country had a lower unemployment rate than whites. And there is not a single person alive right now who would honestly be able to say that minorities, black people specifically, had it better off in 1920 than they do in 2020.
Right.
Right? You know, we have this, we're not even going to get into all like the social side of today, but there's certainly less racism or systemic, which is another garbage term, racism, than there was in 1920, where you know, blacks couldn't serve in the military alongside white people. In the South, you know, you had segregation, you had Jim Crow laws, but at that same time, you've got a lot of economic indicators like unemployment rates. They were much lower. Teenage black unemployment rate in the 1920s, 1930s, up until the 1950s was 3, 4, 5%.
Right.
It mirrored white unemployment rate,
Right.
which basically means that whether you're black, you're white, you're Hispanic, you're Asian, whatever, you were pretty much equal because you had no job skills. Your unemployment rates were
Right.
similar to other people in other groups, whereas now it's totally inverted. I think black teenage unemployment is 50, 60% right now.
Yeah.
That's intolerable.
Yeah, it's incredible.
As a society, I don't see how the same people pushing for $15 an hour can't say that, well, there's a problem there. Why are these teenagers unemployed at such high rates?
Great points. I think we've covered a lot of information in that segment there. So let's try to, you know, tie things up here and put things into maybe some real world scenarios, right?
That's where we live. That's the biggest problem, is that everything is in theory, right? Nothing ever gets examined from the standpoint of real world, right? Like we're these inert blocks of wood to be moved about on a board, and there's no real world implications. So yeah, talk about what, you know, what, like for example in your business.
Yeah, so I think there's an opportunity here. You know, businesses, employers, and employees, we're linked, and we will be linked in perpetuity.
Right.
And when we're talking about minimum wage, you know, it affects, not infects. It affects everybody.
There is an infection.
Yeah, it's called government. But we're linked together, and so it impacts us in different ways. And let's look at it from that perspective. So, you know, I've been a business owner, you've been a business owner, I've been an employee, and you've been an employee.
Yes.
In my business, in the healthcare business that I'm in, I hire a lot of people that are what you might consider low-skilled individuals. And just so you guys know, I pay, you know, maybe $10 to $11 an hour for these individuals, well above the federal minimum wage. But it's certainly going to be below the minimum wage if it's boosted up to 15.
Sure.
But I can tell you right now, in my businesses where I'm paying $10 to $11 an hour, I still have people that come in looking for work who don't even have the minimal experiences.
Like they would take less, maybe,
that I need, right? And I'd be happy to pay them less. You know, for whatever reason, they're either not willing to work for it. Right now, I'm able to pay less.
Sure.
So if someone comes in and let's say my average wage is, you know, $10 to $11. I definitely have circumstances where I have someone come in who displays a passion,
sure, who
displays what seems to be a driven work ethic and whatnot,
right,
but they just simply don't have any experience doing what we do. So I'll offer them $8, $9, $9.50 an hour to come in.
And how long do they normally make that?
Not very long at all.
Right.
Not very long at all.
That's the biggest point, right?
Yeah.
They show that they are worth more, so you pay them more because you want to keep them.
100%.
Because you don't want your competitor to scoop them up, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the part of it that gets taken away from the argument, is that you're this greedy schmuck that is just pinching pennies. Like, so let's take the devil's advocate role where, Mike, you're paying $11 an hour. What is another $4.50?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question.
What is
right?
that to you? What is that to you? Is that a fewer dinners out with the wife? Is that a vacation to Florida instead of the Cayman Islands?
So I've actually run the numbers on this.
Okay, cool.
And it cuts my income in half.
Really?
In half.
Now, your taxable income or what you actually take home?
No, my take-home income would be
That's amazing.
Would be cut in half. And
what factors? So that's taxation, that's employment taxes, that's unemployment insurance, that's employee. Did your company provide health insurance? All that.
Yeah, benefits. I mean, the whole nine yards. When all of that's factored into
$4 an hour cuts you in half.
Yeah, it cuts me in half.
And how many businesses can afford to be cut in half right now?
I don't know of any right now, given the current circumstances. Sure. Maybe some can, but
say in the best of times, how many could really handle it?
I still don't think hardly anybody.
Right. Because your whole incentive of you're a smart guy, you've got 20 plus years of work experience and business owner experience. How valuable, like you could go out and get a job working for some major national healthcare organization, right? Because that's your field, right?
Well, and quite frankly, that's probably what would wind up happening.
Yeah,
in
you would close your
like
business.
If I were to cut my income in half due to something like this, I would probably, if that were the only option,
sure,
I would probably shutter the business and I would go to work for somebody else.
And that's good for Mike. But that's not, how many employees are we talking about here?
75 to 90.
So we're talking about 75 to 90 people immediately out of work.
Correct.
And not because you're greedy, but just because the incentive for you is pointless.
Well, take a look at it from any employee's perspective.
Like, I know you're not a multi-mega millionaire, right? Okay. So let's say that your income cut from 200 to 100, right? You probably could go get $100,000 on the open market as an employee.
Easily.
But if you were making, let's say you're making Bezos FU money, where you're in the billions, right? And we cut you in half, you can say, well, I'll just offshore. I'll pay these guys $15 an hour to satisfy this government.
Yeah.
But I'll go hire people in India and China or wherever to make up for it. Or hell, I'll just have one of my many hundreds or thousands of technology experts. I'll have them automate that job.
So that you bring up a really good point there, because I'm speaking from the standpoint of a small business owner.
You can't automate.
There's no way I can do what I do. But a Walmart, a Bezos, a McDonald's, or something like that. At that point, real decisions are made about, can I offshore that, or can I kiosk it? Can I bring AI? Can I bring technology in at a lower price point? Because at the end of the day, it's about market economics, right? The market doesn't care. The person who sets the price point's the consumer, to be quite frank. If they're willing to buy your product because it's less expensive or higher quality, they don't care whether it's real people making it or robots making it.
I saw this. I remember this cool meme I saw a couple of years ago. They had this burger flipping robot. Right. And it's like Flippy the Burger King burger. I think it was called. It's like Flippy the burger flipping robot asks, "What is a minimum wage?" Okay. Right. And so that's really what we're talking about here. Is that businesses like what you fall into, you would just shut it down.
Well,
so that adds 75 people. And how many businesses will absorb your employees if they have to similarly pay them that wage?
They can't.
Right. So that's 75, 80 people on the dole or on the unemployment benefits.
Right.
Or worse, nothing. Because there's no guarantee that unemployment benefits are just going to stay where they are indefinitely. There's going to be some kind of a reckoning where the pendulum swings back the other way. Because we're in that stage right now where, you got a so-called Republican that gets out of office, a Democrat gets in office, which we're not political in this podcast, but the pendulum has swung towards that side of the political spectrum, right? So when it swings back and they say, well, the Republicans just won the Congress, they won the Senate, by God, we're cutting off all these benefits. Well, what happens to those 75, 80 people?
Right.
Who were otherwise employed and happy? Right. They maybe want more, and you're willing to say, hey, look, go get go to night school, go get a registered nurse.
Or I'll help you achieve those things, right?
Exactly.
I will put some resources towards that, right?
I want you to be an LVN. I want you to be a registered nurse. I don't want to employ you for 50 years.
Well, is
that what you're saying? Is that what in your thought process?
Yeah, and when you look at it,
yours are like healthcare workers that are like lower, that don't have those certifications.
Right.
But in your mind, as the employer, are you mad when one of them wants to do more?
No, I want them to want to do more.
Exactly.
I want them to achieve.
And government says, no, you don't, sir. You want to make more money.
Well, and there you have. So let's take my business owner hat off. Look at it from an employee standpoint.
Right.
what's the goal of all of us as employees?
I want more.
Yeah, every year I go to work, I'd like to get a raise. I'd like to take on some more responsibility. I'd like to get a step up, in management or.
And not all people think like that. I've worked for many, many years with people that's like, nah, just give me my hour. Just give me what I make.
I mean, I'm sure
doing what I'm doing.
I know those people exist.
You are correct that there are a group of people that always want a little bit more.
Well, and they should, right? I think everybody watching this podcast right now would fall into that group. We're trying to climb that ladder. We're trying to move up in our earnings and our standard of living. So I think it's complete balderdash that the government or anybody else would think that a business owner would say, you know what? I don't want that. I don't want to increase my standard of living. I'm willing to completely absorb, these additional costs for minimum wage. The reality is,
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
What I, as the business owner, am going to do is I'll absorb a portion of that cost, but the majority of it, I'm passing along to the consumer.
And if I'm the employee, like, I get a raise. Have you ever gotten a raise?
Yeah, of course.
How good did that feel?
Awesome.
To get a raise because you worked your ass off. You put in extra hours, or you brought something to the management or ownership that they said, dang, that changes things.
Yeah.
We're going to pay you more. We're going to give you more responsibility. How good does that make you feel, as opposed to, which this is something that doesn't get talked about at all, which we don't have a lot of time left and we can kind of just be real brief about it. But if I give somebody something they didn't earn, do they feel good about it?
Have they learned anything by that?
I mean, yes, they get more money, but we're going to talk about in our next shows going on forward, like, how does money that gets printed out of nowhere, affect prices and free markets and all this. But if you just give somebody an arbitrary raise just for the sake of having a pulse, does that really make that person any better off?
Well, and that's
I think that's what we're going to talk about in the future. Right?
It is, and that's the problem with it right now. I think in closing, where we're at is, as minimum wage increases, we're not changing who's poor or who's not. All we're doing is setting a new floor for what the poverty line is going to be.
Right. And
that's the unfortunate thing. And worse than that is there's going to be a group of people who get left behind.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's really what's unfortunate for them.
We're all about freedom and liberty on this podcast. Yep. We don't want anyone left behind. That's the total worst misconception about people with our political, philosophical theory, is that we're just cold-hearted bastards that only want, if you don't have the ability to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, well, you just deserve to live in the street. No, negative, 1,000% difference. We want people to take pride in themselves. We want them to want to do more than they're currently doing, earning, whatever. And so this whole theory behind just arbitrary wage floors and giving more people money so that they can go buy more crap that they don't need, who sells that crap? It's their political donors.
Yeah.
Who sells this iPhone? They use slave labor to make it.
Yeah.
Well, great. Now I can go buy someone else's slave labor with my new $15 an hour minimum wage that I'm not going to earn.
Those of us that believe in personal responsibility, individualism, what we're trying to do is bring everybody.
It's to lift people up.
Bring everybody success.
Exactly.
Bring everybody success.
Not because we're cold-hearted and we don't care about people. It's the exact opposite. And that's why, again, we go back to the original question of why we wanted to do this show in the beginning. It's because we want people to understand that we are actually the more liberals. We're the ones that want, what is liberty, right? We want that freedom.
Absolutely.
For everyone.
So there we go. I think we appreciate you guys watching. Next episode, we're probably going to get into some further aspects of the piece of the pie of how to grow wealth and some
like
monetary
pie.
I do like pie. I do like pie.
Cheers, my friend.
We had fun, Mud. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Liberty Room, Mike and Mike. We'll see you next time.